And we're live.
Welcome to the Big 12 Week 3 podcast. I'm Commissioner Stormstopper, coach of the Kansas Jayhawks.
And I'm
here.
Nate Stone, coach of the TCU Horned Frogs, the 0-2 TCU Horned Frogs. But we're coming with the oh man, we're coming with a podcast trying to get some more multimedia going on here so we can talk about what's been happening in the Big 12. Not the greatest start, but we're going to go through some of the teams, see what the future is looking like, see how they've been playing. So right now, we're going to go back through the Big 12 Network post-Week 3 power rankings that Smickens puts together every year. To give you an idea of where teams stand right now, in first place is the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Followed behind them by only 4 points is the Texas Longhorns. Then you have the Kansas Jayhawks, Oklahoma State Cowboys, and West Virginia Mountaineers round out the top 5. Then at 6, you have Baylor Bears. 7, you have the TCU Horned Frogs. And 8, Kansas State Wildcats. 9, Iowa State Cyclones. And 10, Oklahoma Sooners. We're going to start by talking about each of these teams, beginning with those Oklahoma Sooners. So what happened to those?
A lot happened. I think the easiest thing to do would be to point to their quarterback situation. Graham Burnett declaring early, Chester Brenner transferring out, and a true freshman Eric Pope being the starter. I think it would be wrong to limit it to that, though. Pope hasn't been great, but he's been but there have been worse quarterbacks that have been able to get their teams to bowl games, and Oklahoma's defense has not been doing the team any favors at all.
No, they got torn apart by Auburn, giving up 49 points in that game. And then, good.
And that was the worst loss in school history, 32 points.
That says something about the state of Oklahoma's program, especially considering where they've been. They were in the playoffs last year. Yeah. And the CFBHC quarterfinals ended up losing by only 3 to Alabama, and then they took a hard loss. And then the next week against Iowa wasn't much better. They made Marcus Black look like a Heisman candidate. Michael Black.
They made Marcus Black look like a Heisman candidate too, but
these black quarterbacks are not
all black quarterbacks look alike.
They've had some pretty similar stat lines tearing up these Sooners. How is with Eric Pope in the air, they need something out of their running game, but they're not really getting it as much.
I don't know. I think Maurice White has been fine. There's only so much he can do, and I have a hunch that Oklahoma is going to start asking more of him starting against Texas Tech because, he kind of murdered Texas Tech last time they played. So, but yeah, they're kind of going to need him to shoulder most of the load on offense.
Yeah, see, right now, Maurice White has 45 carries for 227 yards and 2 touchdowns. So just above 5 yards per carry. You can't really ask a ton more of him. 100 yards in each of the games. One of the biggest – that upcoming battle against Texas Tech is going to be very interesting. We'll talk more about those Red Raiders at the top of the line, but that's a running back battle that I think a lot of people want to see.
Yes, if you're into good, old-fashioned, hard-nosed football, definitely want to tune into that one.
Yeah. So far this season, though, would you say Maurice White's been their best player?
Absolutely. And no one's really stepped up to be competition to him either. But he's been he would be the best player on most teams, though. Again, like you said, you can't ask too much more than what he's been doing. He's been, he's been consistent. He's been explosive, and he's been the reason for most of Oklahoma's points so far. So
yeah, considering he scored half of their touchdowns, the other 2 came from Pope. They've also only scored 4 in 2 games. Yeah. So, what would you say their biggest weakness is right now?
Like I was saying earlier, I think quarterback is not their biggest weakness. I'd go with their pass defense. And again, part of it's because they've gone up against 2 quarterbacks who Marcus Black, he needs no introduction. Michael Black, it seems like he's actually putting together a good season this year, so more so down on that.
It's a surprise, but he's in that line of Iowa quarterbacks that have put up impressive performances.
Yeah. Either way, Oklahoma's made them both look like Heisman contenders, so they obviously can't keep doing that, especially against a set of Big 12 quarterbacks, most of whom are not going to be Heisman contenders.
No, except for one or two, I'd say, that we might be looking at up in New York in a few weeks.
One who makes Oklahoma fans particularly angry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wondering what could have been, especially for this Oklahoma team who was ranked to start the season, but giving up 19 of 29 for 230 and 3 touchdowns against Marcus Black. And even their run defense was a problem. They gave up 3 touchdowns on the ground their first week against Auburn, and that you can't do that.
Nope.
All right. So how does it look out for the rest of the season for them? They play Texas Tech next week on the road. That's a tough game, especially if their run defense isn't doing well. And then they have Pittsburgh and West Virginia, Texas, and then it's all Big 12 play from there. The only other out-of-conference game is Pittsburgh.
Yep. And in my view, this game against Texas Tech, this is a must-win. I don't think they're going to beat Pittsburgh. I don't think they're going to beat Texas. If they don't beat Texas Tech, then they could quite easily miss full eligibility before they win a game. That's how serious it is.
It would be the first time they ever missed a bowl game in Oklahoma.
2018.
The worst they've ever gone in a season is what, 9-4?
No, they went 4-8 in 2018.
They went 9-4 in 2018 and 9-4 in 2013. They went 4-8 in 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, they missed a bowl game that year too.
And this year
they've
arguably started this year worse than they started 2018.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are not looking good. And Texas Tech has their own issues, but right now they're sitting on top of the conference with 2 impressive wins. So we'll see how that game plays out for them.
Yeah.
All right, so next up, we're looking at the Iowa State Cyclones, the 1-1 team. So how does Iowa State look?
They actually look a little bit better than I thought they were going to be this season, but not like worlds better. But, they were competitive against Nebraska. They crushed New Mexico on the road. Didn't really leave any doubt there. Their backfield is still a problem. Like they're not really. Losing Tom Oldham too was a blow they weren't expecting.
Yeah.
Their defense has been able to pick up the slack, and with a lot of young contributors too. Like this Iowa State defense is going to be good this year and stay good for a few years.
Yeah, no, they're definitely a force to be reckoned with. They have big playmakers along the defense, but it's a struggle to fill in those holes left by Pacheco and Tom Oldham. Out of an offense that was rolling with the two of them.
Yeah.
It's kind of their identity over the past 3 or 4 years, so they still kind of struggle to find that offensive identity. But their win against New Mexico is definitely something to be a fan of. They have not many sacks on defense. They don't have many big players so far yet. No one making at least impact plays at this point. But there's still a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, and there's a lot of interceptions.
4 sacks, I think, or 3 different players with a sack.
And we also might not know how many players had sacks against New Mexico, considering they had interceptions clogging up the whole stat line.
Yeah, that's also another thing. There could have been a definite benefit there. So that's really what's going to rely on, because what would you say their strengths are on defense, the pass rush or the secondary?
A little bit of both. I'm a big fan of David Tolliver at cornerback. I think Lauren Daniels, the freshman strong safety, has been off to a good start so far. Had 1 of the 4 interceptions against New Mexico. I I do think their defensive front is the better unit, the more experienced one. Even though I think they do have a freshman, I think Paul Bryant's starting for them this year, which I find amusing. But but yeah, I mean, it's just a good defense all around, and Iowa State's been putting up good defensive numbers with even less talent for a few years now. So I'm excited, and as Kansas coach, I'm not excited for what they're going to be able to do.
Yeah, right when you get past them sneaking up on you with, well, not sneaking up when they're a playoff team, but with those great running backs, quarterback position has always been around the same. It always seems like Iowa State has the same kind of quarterback in there. Kind of scrambler type. Reminds me of Marcus Schwartz at Baylor this year. They still have I can't see. Remember? Oh, August Blank. That's different than who they had in the past. He's actually thrown more interceptions than touchdowns this year, so that could be a place to look for them to improve.
Absolutely.
What would you say their biggest weaknesses?
Their backfield as a whole, like you said, Blank more intercept. Blank just hasn't been a plus for them. He's been kind of neutral at best. But on the other hand, so has Avery Jeffries, who's being asked to fill impossibly big shoes. I think they just don't have a playmaker on offense at all. Elliott Efi at receiver hasn't been able to fill that role. Neither has Kamari Malloy at tight end. They have a nice offensive line and enough pieces that like they can do most things decently well on offense. But what are they going to do great?
Yeah, it seems more that you can get by with a no-name defense. You have a bunch of good players who big plays on your defensive side of the ball, but it's harder to have that philosophy on offense. It's harder to have people or go without having people making big plays for you. You need some kind of a playmaker on offense. And Iowa State just doesn't really have that. Jeffries is average. Blank is kind of average. Elliott Effie is a little better, but they just don't have any like true studs. How do you see the rest of this? What? Good.
I was going to say, but on the other hand, it might still be enough for them. The loss to Nebraska hurts them a lot, just because I mean that's one of those games where it could be the difference between 5 wins and 6. And I think that's the range Iowa State's probably looking at this year. I haven't written the preview for their game against Minnesota yet.
I don't good.
Do well in that one, but. I mean, last year, though, it was an 18-17 game.
They're also a better team last year, I think, than they are this year.
Yeah. Iowa State or Minnesota? Well, I mean, or both.
Yeah, Minnesota's about where they were. May have improved a little bit. But they took them to the wire. That was also at Ames, so they don't get the benefit of playing at home for that game.
Yeah. So I think that game will give us a clear indication of just how far away from the top Iowa State is. If they make it close, then they could make a run in the Big 12 this year, given how wide open it is. But,
that's the thing. The Big 12, there's no power teams. We'll talk about this as we go on, but there's no one who's really standing out.
Yeah.
Except for maybe Texas Tech through 2 games. But even then, there's questions about their one-dimensionality.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So move on now to the Kansas State Wildcats, the surprisingly 2-0 Kansas State Wildcats.
But how surprising is it given their schedule?
That is also true.
It is an accomplishment for State to be 2-0 at all against any schedule, though, because we've seen how bad this program has been in the past and how far half has taken them already. And at the end of this week, they should be 3-0.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's impressive for them. If I can find their schedule, I'm looking up what they've done so far. But
they beat Florida Atlantic, I believe that was 44-41, and then beat Central Michigan 34-28.
Both games they should win, but you never really know with a team like Kansas State. And then they have Wyoming, and then it starts to get interesting because It's Big 12 play all there. I think I like the setup where most teams have their 3 out of conference games, and then it's just straight conference play. So whatever happens in these first games isn't going to completely determine what happens in the conference. So we're going to really get to see how they do against Wyoming, and then they start off, they get TCU at home and again go to Texas, which is going to be a tough game for them. But if they start off 3-0, maybe 4-0, they could be looking at a bowl game, which is very impressive given this team.
I think if they start 4-0, they will go to a bowl game, because if they can beat TCU, then they have Iowa State and Oklahoma at home. And to consider Kansas State beating Oklahoma as likely, like, boggles the mind. But like, if they beat TCU, I think that's fair to assume at that point. But I think that's also an if. We're
also going to see what happens. But how about Raheem Morrell so far, the greatest?
The greatest. I love the kid's attitude, and I think he had a bad game against Central Michigan. I mean, not a terrible game, but not a good one either. I think though he's going to bounce back against Wyoming, show people why the fact that why he calls himself the greatest isn't because he's the best player in the world right now, but because he's willing to work hard to get there. And that's why he's made a lot of fans. So he's definitely, like, Kansas State hasn't had, like, even marginally good quarterbacks for a while. No. And Julius Minnow's the closest they've come to it since Harvey Fagan, really.
And, since Harvey Insane Fagan, like, I don't know what to call him. That was one of the most ridiculous players I've seen. But incredibly, Kansas State threw 9 touchdown passes the entirety of last season. Raheem's throwing 5 in 2 games.
Yep. Like, it sometimes seems obvious how much of a difference the quarterback can make, but like seeing it actually happen is like,
yeah. Quarterback is a weird position because it's hard necessarily to see the difference between guys, especially when you look at surrounding casts around them, especially mid-tier guys. You can see the impact of elite quarterbacks and how they manage a game, but it's sometimes harder to see how having a guy like Morrell versus Minnow can change things up. But when you have someone come in like Kansas State did with experience playing at Moberly Area Community College in Missouri, he can come in and make plays for him. And he's definitely the most talented quarterback Kansas State's ever had.
Exactly. So as long as he can, find that consistency week in and week out, like Kansas State's never going to ask him to do too much. They love their balance. They love Elijah Humphrey for good reason. And he has good receivers. So like it's not like they're asking him to go it alone either.
He has a solid offensive line, especially where they are at least consistent. There's no real holes along the offensive line. They have Ari Kern, who's a future NFL player. The rest of the guys are going D1 in something other than sports, but they're also good players that can be consistent and get them. I'm not sure how their offensive line ratings were the first 2 weeks, but they're not bad on offense. And even their defense is where their weaknesses lie. It's going to be interesting to see, but they're pretty solid across the board. None of their players are elite, and I think their biggest weakness is going to be in the performance of their front seven, their run defense. But
absolutely, and we're already seeing that too. Like their secondary has been playing out of its mind, like un-Kansas State, like really. But the run defense is averaging, or it's allowing, I believe, nearly 5.3 yards per carry. And for context, their pass defense is allowing 5.3 yards per attempt. So, like,
so their that also could be a statement on the passing abilities of the quarterbacks they've played so far.
This is also true, but past Kansas State teams would not have put up those kinds of numbers even if I were playing quarterback for the other team.
Exactly. They find some way to let a ball go by. All right, but
With Kansas State, I think we'll finally get a sense of as long as they beat Wyoming, I think their first real test is against TCU, and if they win that game, like they're probably going bowling. If they come close, they have a shot. If they get blown out, then we start looking at 0-9
let's
watch.
see. I'm not gonna say too much about that game because,
of course, I don't expect you to.
Well, no, because people say I'm biased either way. We're gonna see what happens though, because TCU is a very young team. That secondary, if they keep playing like that, can cause some problems, especially for a young quarterback, young receivers. So it depends on how they play. It really is going to be Raheem Morel's first test, though, because I expect that secondary, especially after playing games against three of the best quarterbacks in college football right now, to be ready for a guy like that. But we'll see how he does. Like, we really are going to be able to see in the first few weeks, especially after they play TCU and then Texas after that, to see how they play those two schools and see how Morrell performs. Is going to tell us a lot about him and how these next 2 years might go for Kansas State.
And we can use that game to segue into the next team in the power rankings, which is TCU.
It's just TCU, yeah. So I'll let you talk first.
All right. Yeah, TCU, even with an 0-2 start, this isn't looking the same way as last year's start did. It's not like TCU's been getting blown out. They lost they led Clemson, but couldn't hold that lead. They nearly rallied against SMU, lost by 1. So I think this game against Rice is going to tell us a lot. That was a 4-point game last year in Fort Worth, I believe.
This was one of TCU's only victories.
What did you say?
Yeah, it was one of TCU's only victories that year.
Yep. So, yeah, like you said, another game against a top-flight quarterback, Eric McLean. He's a sophomore, but he's showing all the talent in the world.
He had a rough time of it last year against the Frogs. He threw 2 picks to Christopher Malone, who's still going to be sitting back there in that secondary. So we'll see how that happens. But I don't know. I feel pretty good about these first 2 games. It's a lot of what I wanted to see. It would have been nice to win the Clemson one, but Death Valley is a tough place to go against an elite team like that. Same thing going to Dallas to play SMU. Coming away with only 1, I think there's a lot to learn from those games. I think our young guys kind of leave with their heads held high, but it's still going to be interesting to see. Giving up 33 and 31 and as many yards through the air is kind of troubling, though, given how strong the secondary is supposed to be.
Indeed, and still something to watch for. It's a secondary that's seen a lot of turnover, but not a lot of turnovers.
Yeah. We had 14 interceptions in all of 2018 and then 5 as a secondary in 2019. So that was a big hit. Kind of changed a lot of games not having those turnovers. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can start making those plays again. But yeah, TCU lost their number 1, number 2, and number 3 corners from last year. So it's also getting these new guys into the game and getting them adjusted and up to speed.
And at the same time, integrating pretty much an entirely new pass offense as well. Now that Sam Milner's quarterback, Griffin McCann and Ben Nielsen at the receiver spots. But on the bright side for the offense, at least, Shamar Burrows has been a constant, and he's looking better this year than his first 2.
Yeah, I don't know where this Shamar came from. Maybe it's just because he got older. He didn't progress that well, so he kind of had a rough offseason. But I think he's liking the new offense. I think he's a guy who might work better alongside a scrambler to kind of make plays on the outside or run that pistol offense, because he was shoehorned into a spread or into pro style with Burden, and that might not have been what worked best for him. So he's looked good in these first 2 games. I'm excited to see how he plays and keeps going.
But he's playing listed as TCU's MVP so far. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm I'm curious to see what you think your record will be at the end of the year.
Oh man, I don't know. I've been saying at the end of the regular season, 7-5 or 8-4. Um, the thing is there's not a team on the rest of my schedule that I don't think I can beat, and there's not a team that I have left that I don't think I can lose to.
I can agree
I
with
think
you.
every game is going to be like terrifying because it's a lot of the youth. I think if Milner and those guys have a great game, they can play with anyone in the country. But there's also the other side where they can lose to anyone in the country. So I think you'll kind of see a balance of that. I hope we beat Rice. I think we'll beat Rice and Kansas State. Playing you all, we're playing them at home. Seems like we play you at home every single time.
I know.
I don't know why I never go up to Lawrence.
It does
It's
seem like that.
come down here to Fort Worth. Maybe we'll get that one out of the way. That'll be a big demon to knock over because even Burden never beat Kansas, or no one else did either.
It's what, 5-0?
I think it's 5-0. Ever since Johnny Green blew the 21-3 lead.
21-0 actually.
It was also 21-3, wasn't it?
No, it was 21 28-14,
and
31-28.
8, then 35-28, or 31, yeah. Oh, well. But it's going to be interesting to see. I think I like my odds against the top of the conference because you have teams like Texas and Texas Tech who are pretty one-dimensional on offense, but power rushing teams have also given my defense a lot of trouble in the past. I've struggled to stop them. So we could see how that plays out. But, yeah. What would you say is the biggest weakness right now? Because we've been saying that for these teams too.
Well, so statistically so far, I mean, it's probably the pass defense, but that could also be a trick of the light because of the quarterbacks we've played so far.
Mm-hmm.
But I think our opposing quarterbacks are completing 64.6% of their passes. That's the third highest in the conference. 145.6 passer rating, also third highest. But you also haven't really been tested on the ground, I don't think. So
Yeah.
And you won't be against Rice either. So
Yeah, the first team that really – oh, sorry.
Yeah, we really won't see your run defense in action until conference play, and by then I think your pass defense numbers will stabilize just because there are not a lot of Jamel Armstrongs or Eric McLean's or Andre Webb's in conference.
Yeah. We have a lot of really young bucks. We have Muhammad Foster, but he's a different style. And then, of course, Chester Brenner.
Yep.
But we'll see how he ends up coming out once he plays some other teams. Does that segue to the next part of it? Oh, no, they're Baylor. All right, so do you have a prediction on the final record before we go on?
I didn't have a prediction for the record itself. I think like in the 6-6 to 7-5 range is probably about as good an estimate as any, but with probably as much variance as anybody.
Yeah. The goal is just to make a bowl. Maybe the first 6-6 season.
Count to 6 every year. It's important.
For a program that's almost exactly 500 overall, never gone even close to 6-6. But all right. So next one is the Baylor Bears. Another team who's had very high expectations over the past few years that not a letdown year, but somewhat of a rebuilding year, or at least refocusing.
Yeah, and a year where this is the weaknesses that they're showing are not the ones I was expecting at all.
Mm-hmm.
Namely, they've been murdered by UCLA's quarterback and Arkansas's quarterback.
Oh yeah.
But also wide receivers. I know obviously that they're linked, quarterbacks throw to wide receivers. I promise I'm not stupid. but my point is more
wide receivers at that point.
What do you say?
It's been both the second guy that's really tore him up.
Yeah, like they've been torn up not just by the number one wide receivers though. It's been number two wide receivers crushing them. Jay Areola from UCLA, Noel Lejeune from Arkansas. I did have to make a couple of jokes at Jay Areola's expense when I wrote those articles, but yeah, Baylor's pass defense just hasn't slowed down anybody, and that's really concerning that they've had horrible efficiency numbers on a lot of attempts. So it makes me wonder what's going to happen, like whether or not those efficiency numbers are going to get even worse against quarterbacks who throw less, but off out anyway.
But those are also some air raid offenses they're playing, like players who throw it up 40, 50 times a game. It's interesting, though, because UCLA is starting an athlete as their number one wide receiver. He didn't show up on the stat line at the very least against Baylor.
He should not be their number one receiver.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what position he's actually supposed to play, but I'm not completely sure it's wide receiver.
Yeah.
He's 6'5", 200-something pounds, but he's a pass blocker. Like that, I can see him at tight end. We'll see, though.
Maybe a tight end, maybe I think he's too light to be an offensive lineman.
Mm-hmm. So I think tight end, maybe offensive guard kind of split, but I'm not.
But they've also got him playing strong safety, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, but we'll see, though. I think he had catches in the next game that UCLA played. I think he played all right, but we're not here to talk about the Pac.
Yeah.
But the fact that he was starting as their number one wide receiver and they still torched Baylor is not a good sign.
Not at all. Their secondary depth is clearly a huge question mark at this point. Like Kyle Cunningham, I'm still a fan of his, but he can't be on an island.
Oh man, how about their offense though? Marcus is completing over 70% of his passes, second in the conference behind. Actually, the exact same completion percentage as Muhammad Foster. They're both 43 of 61.
Yep, and Swartz gets the edge for having thrown 17 extra yards.
Yes, and no interceptions.
But their running game hasn't been terrible. Nazir Burden's been able to score at least, not getting a lot of yards per carry, but on the bright side, Marcus Swartz has been supplementing the run game beautifully. 101 yards and 3 touchdowns through 2 games.
They're scoring a lot. They're in shootouts.
Yep.
They split up 44 and 54 in their first 2 games. That's one of the top offenses in the country. It's just that they've given up more than they've scored.
Exactly.
They've played 3 overtime periods already.
And the fact that they're going to overtime against these teams, at the very least, these games are competitive, and we could be talking about a 2-0 Baylor right now. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we'd be talking about a ranked 2-0 Baylor though, considering they dropped 7 spots for going to overtime against UCLA.
Yeah,
but I mean,
we'll see how their next game against California goes. But once they get into conference play, who's going to throw it on them like that?
I mean, there's some quarterbacks who are capable of throwing. They're just not going to be asked to throw a lot.
Yeah.
But
do you think their pass defense will hurt them that much when someone like Chase Shapiro is trying to throw against them? I think when you have them, you have Kyler Tackett, who hasn't shown a ton. You have Iowa State's quarterback, who we were just talking about, name slips me, August Blank. We'll see how they do, but he also has to go against Chester Brenner.
Brenner's been murdered. He has everything that's been torching Baylor so far. Morrell could be a problem against them. Even Kyler Tackett though, I mean, he's not necessarily putting up huge numbers, but he's still completing nearly 71% of his passes, and eventually he's going to put the rest together, I think.
Yeah. So how do you think the rest of the year shakes out for Baylor?
Ooh, that's a good question, and I don't know. Like, I think there's one of two ways it happens. If they're able to show some improvement against California, I think they can still recover and win the conference. They were the team rated the highest by the Chicago Tribune preseason rankings. They were ranked. They were ranked to the highest of any team in the conference in the preseason. So clearly, there's some reason to think that Baylor can pull out of this. But if their defense doesn't get any better, then a missed bowl game is also completely on the table.
Yeah, I say the same thing. They just gotta get their defense together. Yeah. Their offense plays like this, and their defense is not giving up 40 a game, which I'm not sure they will against better or against worse passing offenses than what they've played. They could be in really good shape, but it's going to be interesting to see. I think California is going to tell us a lot. I think Iowa State will definitely tell us a lot, because if they can shut down Iowa State, whose offense isn't great, then it means they can do enough to win games, especially in the Big 12.
Yeah, and if they can't shut down Iowa State, then
they're in a lot of trouble. Then I see them going like 3-9.
Yeah.
Beating Oklahoma still. Poor Oklahoma. All right. Now that leads us to the top half of the conference.
More fun home, country road to the place I belong. West Virginia.
All right. Take me home.
Country road.
All right. But Muhammad Foster and J.C. Weldon, that's still the name of the game for this team.
Yeah.
I think that's the way it was when everyone went into the season. I think that's what we're getting from them. I think Muhammad Foster is efficient through the air. He's doing what he needs to on the ground, even though they played a tough Penn State team.
Yep, they acquitted themselves well against them.
Yes. It's the number one team in the country, so you can't knock them too much for losing that, even being 0-2 right now.
Yeah, like when I say count to 6, that's not what West Virginia is doing at all. They are scheduling tough non-conference games. Mm-hmm. They're definitely cutting their teeth. They're not shying away from the competition, but that also hurts their bowl chances. So,
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this affects them moving forward. But
they could.
I respect that a lot. I think you need to play tough out-of-conference teams. I think it tells you more about your team than going the Michigan of old route and just trying to get the recruiting points of making a bowl.
Yeah.
Which long-term probably doesn't help you a ton. Let's see how J.C. Weldon's been doing this year. It's about what you expect, though. The dude is a freak.
He to think that Muhammad Foster might not be the best player on that offense is mind-boggling, considering how good Foster's been this year. But Weldon's just – Weldon's incredible.
16 catches for 223 and a touchdown in only 2 games.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's something else right there. He's leading the conference in receiving, and at the end of the season, he will still be leading the conference. Well, actually, he's not. Lamont Wilder from Baylor is at 225. But at the end of the conference, make no mistakes, J.C. Weldon will be. Actually, Jay Dunn from Oklahoma State has even more. All right, he's third.
But, still, it's he's still putting up great numbers.
Still putting up insane numbers. He's still going to
can ask from the West Virginia offense at this point, though, is for them to get in the end zone, and it's not. I think they kicked how many field goals against 4, and then 4 against Penn State.
Yeah, I think they've kicked more field goals than anyone else in the conference. Do you think that's a game plan thing? Do you think you have them running a pretty conservative game plan?
It's possible. It's also possible for them to have been going aggressive and kicking from ranges that other teams might punt from. I honestly don't know, but like it does seem like they could afford to take more chances on third and fourth downs and try to get 7 points. The only problem with that, though, is that if you fail to convert on fourth down, then you give the opposing the opposing offense the ball in better field position.
Especially when you're playing teams like Penn State, you don't want to give them anything for free. You got to take the points there. But they are 8 of 9. Their kicker's 8 of 9 from field goals, 4 of 4 from the extra point stripe, basically. But 4 of them have been over 40 yards. 4 of those field goals have been deep. So there's a lot to like from their kicking game, at least.
Yeah, and from that range, like it's hard to go for it on fourth down too, just because like you don't know that you're actually going to convert that into 7 points in the first place.
Yeah.
19-yarder against Penn State that really they needed to go for it on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're on the 3-yard line, even if you don't get it, you back up the other team enough that I think it's the right decision, but it doesn't always work out. So Hudson Adam, 3 tackles and a sack in the first 2 games, nothing too bad. Who do you think is their MVP? Is it Foster or Weldon? Because I'm not sure you can give any other options.
I'm going to go with Foster because it's not just Weldon who's producing for this team. Like Weldon's obviously contributing a significant amount, but I think Foster's been able to do a good job spreading the ball. He's been seriously accurate. I have to check what his stats were last year, but like his freshman year, he completed less than 56% of his passes. His sophomore year, he was at 61.8. This year, he's at 70.5, and he hasn't thrown an interception yet.
He's been an incredible example of someone who has progressed after getting started as a freshman and showed flashes of brilliance and then continued to get better each and every year.
Yep.
Even as a stud freshman, he put in the work and effort and improved.
And fans across the Big 12 would either be very happy or very scared if he does decide to return for his senior year, depending on who you ask and whether or not you're rooting for your team or for the whole conference.
Seems like he's a type that should return, though, because really, how high do you think he would go in the draft if he were to enter this year? I think he garners some interest. He'd be a tough time.
If he were to enter with the current class and no other earlier declarations, he'd be a first rounder easy. And
this current class is a struggle for everyone.
And I think, if though guys like Matt Jones also enter, or I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but if a few other guys enter, then the fact that he's a scrambler might hurt his stock because not a lot of teams in the NFL are interested in that. So he might do better just staying for an extra year and proving that he can back up what he did this year. And also chasing glory and championships with his team too.
Yeah, so no, I think he has a lot to offer. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he progresses through the season to see if he's going to get better on this. But there's a good chance that he's not in the Big 12 next year, and that he is being started way too early for some other NFL team.
Absolutely.
Especially with the number of early decks that we've seen in recent years.
I think the Buffalo Bills would be an interesting fit for him, but I don't know if that would be a good fit for him.
The Buffalo Bills are already calling it. They're going to reach on Mahomes.
They're scramblers. They need a quarterback to have the assets. But, I don't know if he wants to go. I don't know if it would be good for him to go to a rebuilding project.
Yeah, he is a type that should get drafted, sit somewhere behind an established guy, behind a scrambler almost, to be able to spend a couple of years as a backup in a scrambling system and then get into it. or at least play with someone who knows. You never know if with the Brian Brown deal not being set in stone yet, he could end up in Miami with his old college coach.
That would be fun.
That would be really interesting, especially with the talent you have around him there. But that's also all speculation at this point.
Yeah, and while he's still here, we should appreciate what he's doing in college.
Which is really incredible.
Yeah.
He had – I wonder how big of a hand he had in convincing J.C. Weldon to come join him. Call him up on the phone every day. Is that Marshall? Like, dude, you don't need to be there. Like, it's not worth it.
Every time Marshall lost, like, going on a road trip to Huntington, being like, JC,
come on. Let's do it. Let's do it together. And it looks like they have.
Yeah. Like, it's just a beautiful combination to watch.
So how do you see the rest of this season playing out for West Virginia?
I think they could I think they're a very good team, and I think even with their defensive issues, which are myriad, I think their offense is good enough to counter that. I just think they could be arbitrarily good, but still struggle their way to 6-6 just because of the schedule. Like, Arkansas is not an easy game. It's one where I think they're probably the better team, but not one where they're guaranteed anything.
Yeah.
So an 0-3 start would put them behind the 8 ball. They got out last year, but it's hard to do that. So,
but if they go 6-3, say they lose to Arkansas and manage to go 6-6, that could be enough to win the Big 12 North.
Well,
no division. 6-3 in conference.
No divisions anymore.
What?
No divisions anymore.
Oh, not division. Not just the Big 12 North, but to go to the championship game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like
that
would.
You could very well have like a 6. They're my current pick to win the conference. I think that they have the best offensive player, maybe the second best offensive player, and the best defensive player. Whatever's around them is around them, but I think the talent's going to shine through.
Yeah, and I think they're not my pick. I think, but they're. I mean, obviously, like, you know, a very credible dark horse in my mind.
Mm-hmm. For sure. All right. Moving on. Now we're up to number 4, the Oklahoma State Cowboys, and what a start!
They are putting up video game numbers on offense. Chester Brenner, like, I just find it amazing that he's leading the Big 12 in completion percentage, touchdown and interception ratio for quarterbacks who've thrown an interception. Like, I'm not really counting the 1-0 for Shapiro, the 2-0 for Foster. Like, one's better than either of those. And he's leading the Big 12 in passer rating, doing all of those while leading the Big 12 in attempts as well.
Yeah, no, he is flying out there. But put it in perspective, they played Western Kentucky and Marshall.
Yeah, those teams are awful.
But the real iffy part about this is he had Chester Brenner had 5 touchdown passes against Western Kentucky. They had 2 on the ground, I believe, and they won by 4.
Yep, and that's really worrying. Western Kentucky scoring 45 points isn't something that should happen to most teams, even other CUSA teams.
Yeah, like I don't think they're going to – it would not be surprising at all if Western Kentucky didn't score 45 again the rest of the season.
Yeah. And I think Western Kentucky, like, they could win – are they in the East or the West? Either way, if they're in the East, they could win that division. If they're in the West, they could put up a fight against Rice, but won't win the division. But I think they're one of the CUSA's better teams, but that shouldn't have been that close.
No, it's definitely a problem for Oklahoma State to see that. And I think – I'm not quite sure on that game, but I think they got torched through the air, did they not?
Gave up 291 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in that game.
Yeah, see, you can't be doing that against some of these Big 12 teams. I think that's where their biggest struggle is going to be on their defensive side of the ball. It's definitely not on the offensive side of the ball right now. I think it's going to be that pass defense where they're starting to struggle, where they're seeing people throw it on them, get around a little bit.
The pass defense hasn't been like bad across the board though. Like they're giving up a lot of yards per pass, but they're also limiting opponents to a 58.7 completion percentage, and they've intercepted more passes than they've allowed touchdowns. But again, like four of those interceptions came against Marshall, and they're a whole lot worse than Western Kentucky. Like it was kind of unbelievable previewing that game and realizing how bad Marshall is.
Especially compared to a team that's already not good.
Yeah.
In Western Kentucky. What do you think about having Oklahoma State sitting at number 4 in the conference right now? Do you think that's overranked?
I don't think that's overranked at all. I mean, I think there's I still think Oklahoma State can win the whole thing, or the whole conference, not the whole.
I can see that. Well, any of these top 7, maybe 8 teams could win the whole thing.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And I actually, right now, I still lean Oklahoma State as my favorite to win the conference, and I'm going to stand by that even with the West.
Oklahoma State is your favorite?
Yes. And
Oklahoma State. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And I still think. I mean, I realize it's kind of a bold prediction. Like there's teams that have had better resumes and teams that have looked better, but I think Oklahoma State has the best upside because it's very possible that the Western Kentucky game turns out to be a fluke, and if they can produce
defense comes back together,
if they can be manageable on defense, and if Chester Brenner keeps throwing like he is, and I'm not convinced that he's gonna slow down in a major way. He'll settle down to earth like any quarterback would, but I think he's going to end up being one of the most productive quarterbacks out there, and I don't know that there's a pass defense that can really...
Is that as bad as it seemed, at least through a game? Well, I have, 6 interceptions? That's incredible. Even if 6 interceptions a lot. It's a lot of forcing the ball onto your side and being able to make plays. Now, what I have noticed, these Oklahoma State teams, or at least their Oklahoma State fans, if they bought a season ticket pass, they are getting their money's worth.
Absolutely.
Oklahoma State plays 8 games at home and only 4 on the road. So that might be one of the biggest differences in there. They played all 3 out of conference games at home. Then they go on the road to Texas Tech and play in Lubbock, play at home against Iowa State, at Kansas, and then at home until their last 2 games where they play TCU and Oklahoma. So having that home field advantage for most of the season might actually be a difference for them.
Yep. And honestly, though, I picked them over Texas in particular because of that home field advantage too. Like Texas is probably the team best equipped to neutralize the Cowboy passing attack, but I think they'll still be able to find enough to get by Texas at home.
Do you think post-Raheem era makes a difference for them? Do you think they're going to start feeling the lack of a real number 1 wide receiver like that?
Maybe, but even last year, like they still were able to find huge games from other guys too, like Xavier Gant and whatever the tight end's name was. I don't remember if it was Chua Foreman or if it was Christopher Vincent by then. But what they're doing this year, I think they have a lot of different targets they can throw to. All of them are new, but I mean Brenner's not showing any signs of slowing down, and I mean 2 games like that are enough to build all kinds of chemistry. So like I don't know if they really need like a number 1 every single play he's going to get open kind of guy, but they have enough to they have enough different and unique receivers that they can just spread the field, make the defense try to cover everybody, and not a lot of the defenses can.
Well, it says something now that Oklahoma State has had 5 different players catch touchdown passes. 2 of them have already caught 3 touchdown passes, which is more than some Big 12 teams have thrown in total. Mom Foster's only thrown 2. TCU as a team, Sam Milner's thrown 3. So they've had players catch as many as entire teams in those first 2 games. which is an incredible start. But we've seen teams start off hot before, beating up on some average teams and then kind of peter out during Big 12 play. One of the later Brad Davis years comes to mind.
Yeah, definitely
2016, not 2017 where they won the championship. But in 2016, it was still like super hot Brad Davis, and I don't even believe they won the conference that year.
2016 was Sam Light still. 2018 was Brad
was the one. The late Brad Davis year.
Yeah, where he threw like for 90% against Western Kentucky, but also like he was throwing way too much, and everyone realized, oh, Texas is going to throw. How do we play the pass or play the run? Wow.
Yeah, and he get shut down eventually. So we'll see how that ends up working out for him. But he's not overthrowing it. They still have somewhat of a run game. He's throwing a lot. That's not to say that. But they do need some kind of balance because I don't believe this is a conference where super unbalanced offense can take it all.
And that's
the Chester Brenner has 73 attempts so far this season. So even at just that's 35 or so a game, that's not too bad. It's not like the old Brad Davis throwing 60 times a game.
Right. And like at the same time that it's hard for an unbalanced team to win, like at the same time, I don't think they're going to be able to get much by going balanced. Like Khalil Bell's just not good enough for it.
Mm-hmm. No, they can't really switch too much, but we'll see if it ends up biting them. If there's a team that kind of shows that they have a great pass defense, but not so much of a run defense, that kind of trips them up. Which might be someone down the line. Kansas State. That's a game against a team that they can somehow pull out a win against Oklahoma State that's not really expected because they have the pass defense to do it, and just like their pass defense has been playing. And you can't really take advantage of that weakness of the run defense so far.
Exactly, and that game, it is in Stillwater.
Mm-hmm. They're all in Stillwater.
That is a bad matchup for them.
So we're going to see how that plays out, and we'll see, though. Panthers kind of setting up. You think that Raheem's last year would be the year they make their run, but it may have just left a year too early.
Yeah. But, I mean, even in his senior year, they did make the Sugar Bowl, so.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, they had a great year. But they're set up well. Trevor Orlando's a monster from the 2016 recruiting class, I believe. So
gotta love Dr. Miller on the offensive line too. Like he's been starting since he was a true freshman, and really, he was really thrown into the fire. Most places he would have redshirted, but he handled it well and has now become one of the top draft prospects on the offensive line.
Yeah, we're gonna see how that. Oklahoma State has put out some good offensive line prospects in the past. Ryan Robinson for the Giants is one of the top guys in the nation or in the NFL right now. So we'll see if he can follow in those footsteps. All right, moving on. Now it's your turn. Number 3, the Kansas Jayhawks.
Rock chalk.
Here, all right, let me talk now. Well, and then we'll ask you some questions. So Kansas, they started their year with an interesting performance from Christian Graham. A good performance from Christian Graham, enough to win the game, to beat the Rice Jayhawks. It was in overtime. And so week 2, after they had a bye week 1, Christian Graham looked good. He wasn't he wasn't over the top incredible. And then I'm looking up to see exactly how the second week went down, but it wasn't quite as good. He showed some flaws. But that is youth. It's another one of those freshman quarterbacks starting, so he's going to have those problems. But against Vanderbilt, which is an elite team, especially only losing by 10, is not the worst place to be for Kansas Jayhawks. They're still ranked around 23 right now, and their defense has been impressive too. Giving up 30 to Vanderbilt, again, is not a bad performance. Doing a very good job against Eric McLean from Rice to kind of slow him down and hold the Rice Owls to only 24 points. What do you think has been kind of the defining themes for Kansas at this point in the year?
I think it's probably been just it's just been some transition, replacing both quarterback and running back at the same time. A new starting defensive end. New inside linebacker, a complete reshift of the defensive scheme as a whole. But I don't want to talk too game planning there. But yeah, just getting used to having Christian Graham as the starter instead of Eric Jennings. We can't do the offense that we could last year, and I think that's showing. But at the same time, I really like to see more out of the defense. 24 against Rice is more than I was hoping to let up. We gave up 10 last year. 30 against Vanderbilt, definitely more than I would have liked to have given up. But I think I think that was more coaching than player performance as well. And I think Graham has been doing about as well as I could expect, with the exception of his interception total.
I know that's a pet peeve for you with quarterbacks.
Yep. If you have to throw an incompletion, fine. We can punt the ball 40 yards downfield. You
don't get it to
team that cost us. But obviously that's easier said than done. But he's completing, I believe, 68.4% of his passes. His passer rating is on par with what Eric Jennings was for his career. And I also haven't been asking him to throw as much as I asked Jennings to throw last year either. So I'm really relying on Rod Bolton to be a supplementary option on the offense, and he's also kind of growing into that role.
Yeah. Completing over 8 yards per attempt and 68% of his passes is a very good sign from a quarterback. It helps that you provide him with targets to build into with Malcolm Davis, who will only be around for a year for Graham, but it'll be enough to kind of help him and get him something set in stone so he has someone to throw to.
And I wouldn't trade my receivers for any group in the country.
I'm not
Chris
sure.
Brooks, Timmy Sutton, Noah Hills,
especially a tight end.
Maybe 3 if Hills goes too. But yeah, I think what we're seeing is a team that, if we can put things together, I think we have a really high ceiling, but we also have a lot of flaws, and I think there's a strong possibility that some of those are going to come out at the worst times. Preseason, I think I predicted a loss on the road to Iowa State. I think a loss to TCU, and I think I'd buy more stock in my chances against Iowa State than against TCU right now, just because I just don't trust how I don't trust how I'd match up with your secondary right now.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting match. That's coming earlier in the year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's week 6, I think.
Yeah, it's a week 6 match in Amon G. Carter. Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, Malcolm Davis versus Roman Blackman is going to be one to watch in that one. Roman Blackman hasn't done much in these first couple games, but he was the prize jewel of the 2020 or 2019 JUCO recruiting class. The only way Tom Wyman's loss wasn't too hurt. They're setting up for that big Malcolm Davis-Tom Wyman duel for both their senior years, but it ended up happening. But that's going to be an interesting game. I think that game's going to tell us a lot about the conference, especially as you go at TCU, Oklahoma, at Texas Tech. That 4-week stretch of 3 games is going to be hugely important for each of those teams. And I think the way those 3 games will go will tell us a lot about how the conference in general will go. I think by week 9 or week 10, we'll have a good idea of where teams stand in the conference.
Absolutely. That week 9 will also include Texas at Oklahoma State, and I can't remember Texas, who else? Texas Tech will have also already played Oklahoma State. So, yeah, my hope is that this game against Notre Dame will be a springboard for us. Obviously, like we've had success against Notre Dame the past couple of years, but nothing's guaranteed. Obviously, they beat USC.
They beat USC. That is scary. Yeah. Like, people joke about USC, but really top to bottom, that is the most talented team I may have ever seen in CFBHC. If you just look every position, they have a stud and a backup stud. Like, they really are an incredible team. Just, and the fact that Notre Dame beat them is a lot scarier. Yeah. Like, you can make a joke about coaching or something along that, but it means Notre Dame has some firepower and can do something.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's going to be Kansas's first game played in the great city of Chicago. So.
Oh, yeah. Finally. You think that would have happened a lot earlier?
It's only the second neutral site game I've played in the regular season, too. The other one was ECU, and we don't talk about that one.
Which one, sorry?
Against ECU last year, but like I said, we don't talk about that one.
All right, fair enough. So how do you see talking about these big games coming up? How do you see the rest shaking out for your Jayhawks?
I'm still not changing my prediction of 6-6. I just think there's too many flaws for our team to be able to win the conference this year without a lot of help. I'm not convinced that we don't get some help from the other teams just because it's that kind of year. But
we're gonna have a freaking 7-5 team win our conference. That's just what's gonna happen. I think there's gotta be someone who, or it could be like Baylor or someone, or that goes 1-2 or 0-3 out of conference, goes 5 or say what.
6-3 is probably going to be enough to get into
in conference and ends up going 7-5, wins the conference. So the Big 12 may be a bit down, but
I think I personally think other people have Kansas ranked higher than I do. I have not voted for us in the coaches poll yet, but we're ranked 23rd, and I don't recall where I voted for Kansas this week in the power rankings, but third seems a bit high to me. Yeah. But at the same time, any given week we could play up to that.
I think, there's a lot to look forward to for Kansas. I think when you have such a young talent with Christian Graham, a guy that people look at and he might not be the absolute stud yet, but he fits that same Eric Jennings mold. And Eric Jennings didn't have to start till he was a sophomore, correct?
He started the last 2 games of his freshman year and got playing time in 2 others, but
for the most part, he wasn't the start. He wasn't the true undisputed starter for an offseason, all of that, until his sophomore year. So we're seeing Christian Graham a little differently, getting the full reins as a freshman, but he still fits into that same kind of gunslinger mold, this Kansas quarterback that we've seen so many of, a position that's been incredibly talented for the Jayhawks.
Yep, and I'm looking forward to I don't think I'll be running him in the same offense after this year just because I won't have the talent for it, but I look forward to seeing what he can do in the future. In the meantime,
all right, you're going to see 4 years of the exact same offense from my side. So, but Christian Graham's a guy to have a lot of hope for. It's going to be interesting because Noah Hills is going to be gone as well after this year, isn't he?
He's a junior, but yes, he could very well be gone after this year.
Yeah, with the number of early declarations, that's something you kind of have to plan for, which is unfortunate. If only there a way to talk to these guys and talk them out of it.
Bautista, so we'll be fine at tight end either way, but Hills is special. You can't replace him. But
he was the number 1 tight end in the country coming out, wasn't he?
Yep.
And he's been one of the number 1 tight ends in the country since high school.
Yeah. We should probably move on to Texas now.
To Texas. 3 votes for number 1. Out of the 6 people who voted, it was split between these next 2 teams. And that brings us to the Texas Longhorns, who were a bit disappointing last year, but have started off well. Their first game, they beat Boise State. And then pulling up the wiki page, see they beat in the second game.
Oregon, 27-24 on the road in double overtime? Yeah, double overtime.
Mm.
Their wiki page does not currently have anything on it because Azul was going to convert it to the season pages and never actually did.
Oh. So their second game was against Notre Dame, though, which, again, as we were talking about, it
was against Oregon.
Against Oregon. Oregon, probably the best 0-2 team in the country, but it's one of those green schools.
Yeah, Oregon's kind of weird. Last year, Oregon crushed Texas in Austin. This year, though, Oregon's obviously lost some key players on their defensive line, but and Texas has replaced Dante Fraley with Kyler Tackett, and that's been a huge upgrade for them.
Yes, it really has. Kyler Tackett was a surprise. He was a JUCO pickup and only a sophomore. He was probably considered not the top by talent, but he might have been the top most prized junior college quarterback in the country.
And it's kind of surprising that they went after him when they still had Lucas Beckwith, who I don't think Beckwith's that far behind Tackett, honestly.
Yeah, so we're going to see how that works out and if Beckwith even stays at Texas. Because you have other teams who might be looking for quarterbacks. I'm not sure. I'm thinking like Baylor. Because where's Baylor going post Schwartz?
That's salacious if he
Chester Bennett.
I feel like I don't know. The Big 12 might need to have a vote on whether or not we allow in-conference transfers.
Yeah. So otherwise, he could go somewhere like Houston or SMU post. Or no, they're getting Burden, I believe.
The other Burden?
So the younger Burden, his cousin, second cousin, like once removed, or they're getting some really good guy out of Texas this year, so I'm not really too worried about the post Andre Webb era. So it'll be interesting to see, or you never know, he just stays at Texas. But I think Kyler Tackett could be a special talent. He's had a strong start to this year for the Longhorn. He's completing over 70% of his passes, 8.5 yards per attempt, 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. There's not much more you can ask for, especially of a hybrid quarterback who's not – his type is going to go back and forth between on the ground and in the air. So he's not just a passer, but he's made good plays on the ground. Or not on the ground, through the air. He hasn't done much on the ground yet.
Yeah, not really, but he provides a little bit of mobility. He can throw on the run, and I think it was very telling the difference between the Boise State game and the Oregon game. Similar completion percentages in both games, but he went from I'm trying to pull up the exact stats, but it was like in the 170-yard range against Boise State and in the 290 range against Oregon. And I think the attempt numbers were fairly similar too. Certainly not enough to justify that discrepancy. So if Tackett is able to take those chances downfield, and if he's able to keep making those plays without turning the ball over, that's super valuable to Texas. And especially with Simeon Wells not really off to a great start. He's been doing okay, but
he's getting kind of overshadowed by the guy who came after him the next year. Talk about him and Tackett.
He's also getting overshadowed by the guy who redshirted and was a freshman his own year.
Right.
I don't think it's really a debate whether or not Maurice White's been better than Simeon Wells. He's
coming out of high school, there were a lot of questions about Simeon Wells. Especially given his high ranking, he didn't necessarily seem to have the stats to back it up. If you look at his high school stats, he wasn't great compared to other elite running backs coming out. Even guys like Sean Bell who came from New York, so you can't even compare high school football up there to Texas. But other elite guys, Denoris Jackson probably has the best stats out of anyone coming out of high school. And then you have Solomon McLaughlin and those other spotlight guys. It didn't seem like Wells lined up. He didn't have as many carries. He didn't have as many yards per carries. Didn't have as many touchdowns. He's still an elite guy and a guy that Texas put a lot into, but he might not be that super talented, like all-world guy that they were hoping for from him. But he's still very young, and there's a lot to see.
Yep. And Texas has a lot around him that they don't necessarily need him to be that all-world guy to win the conference this year. I think Texas's biggest problem this year might be that they play most of the other contenders on the road. They do get West Virginia at home, but that's kind of a negative because West Virginia always beats them in Austin or otherwise.
That is my favorite rivalry. West Virginia just, no matter what, no matter how good Texas is, no matter how bad West Virginia is,
they just win that game, and they always and West Virginia always beats Baylor on the road, but not at home. So it's just those are the two rules of West Virginia football.
And they lose to TCU. They haven't beaten them yet.
But Texas also gets Baylor at home. But other than that, Oklahoma State on the road, Texas Tech on the road, TCU and Kansas on the road, and those are teams where I think they both present matchup problems with Texas, but Texas poses a matchup problem with them as well. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. I mean, those are
two teams that Texas beat last year, aren't they?
What do you say?
Those are two teams that Texas beat last year, aren't they?
Well, they've all. I don't remember if they played me last year, but I've never beaten them.
Okay. Yes.
So. Well, and I don't know if I've scored more than I scored 14 points in a game against them once, and then 3 and 0. I hate playing Texas State.
You're telling me.
Yeah, I mean the Longhorns are. I mean, they're very deserving of their number 2 ranking just because that win over Oregon is a cap in their feather that most other Big 12 teams just don't have. They have to be the best team that anybody in the conference has beaten so far, right? Is UCLA the only other option?
Yeah, UCLA. Unless you want to put Boise State, but Texas beat Boise State. I don't think there's many other options. Yeah. Because the Big 12 had a weird mix of playing really bad schools and then like top 10 teams.
Yeah.
They have like 3 or 4 matchup against top 10 teams that they all lost, and then nobody. They haven't played anyone.
And sometimes close games against nobody. So.
Yeah, and sometimes you beat Western Kentucky by 4.
But I was really concerned about Texas when they did only beat Boise State by 3, and I am still concerned about that, but not as much with the Oregon win.
Well, this next team we're going to talk about only beat Boise State by 14, so it's not.
But it's a different kind of win to beat a team 17-3 versus 17-14, I think.
But it was still super tight because Texas Tech scored all their points in the fourth quarter against Boise State. Who's a team like in their first 2 games kind of showed a lot. Boise State could be an interesting team to look at this year if you're looking at for someone to follow outside the conference.
Yeah, but I don't think they can throw the ball. And they don't run it well enough to be unable to throw it. Mm-hmm. So, Boise.
Where would you say Texas's biggest weakness is?
What do you say?
Where would you say Texas's biggest weakness is?
I can't really identify any kind of weakness right now on them. It's not that they're overwhelmingly good in every area. It's just that
it's really bad anywhere.
Maybe their offensive line. And actually looking at their rating, offensive line's their weakness. I'm looking at their rating now. They've averaged 5.15 for the year, which is tied with Oklahoma for 8th. and ahead of only Kansas State. I think I believe they've seen some attrition there, and they're starting a freshman, a sophomore, a senior, and a freshman on their line. So not ideal, and really only Bobby Drake, the freshman left tackle, is on course to start in the NFL one day, or to be in the NFL.
Yeah.
And
everyone else is going D1 and something other, or going pro in something other than sports.
Yeah. So, yeah, that Texas offensive line is a problem. But I mean, how many defensive lines in the Big 12 are capable of actually doing anything about that? Mine probably isn't. I can tell you that up front.
Oh, I think mine can, but we'll see. They don't seem to want to, even though on paper they should be able to. One team they will worry about is West Virginia.
For sure.
There is a bad man on that defensive line. Now, we didn't talk about him very much either when we talked about them earlier. But that is a bad man, Hudson Adams, who
I would not want to be lining up across from him.
I don't know what his rating going into the NFL draft is, but he's a first-round pick.
Absolutely.
He's the best defensive player in the conference, and it's hard to argue for anyone else, really. Maybe Trevor Orlando. But that's a guy that could give Texas problems, even if the rest of West Virginia's defense doesn't. So we'll see how they do with that game. Some of the other games, though, Texas might be in good shape. Might be kind of hard to for other teams to take advantage of that.
I don't think they'll have a problem against Kansas State or Oklahoma. Oklahoma State on the road will be tough, but still winnable, even though I have Cowboys winning that game. Mm-hmm. Texas Tech on the road is also going to be tough, and that's throwing against that secondary. But they also have the linemen and linebackers to make it hard for Texas Tech to do anything, really. I worry about them against teams with a lot of receiver depth because I don't think they have a lot of secondary depth. And I worry about them against teams. So I think that's why I'm picking Oklahoma State against them.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting how Texas season plays out, but they're a lot better than they were last year. I think they're a really young team. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like looking for next year, they're not going to reload at center on the offensive line. But there's a lot to like about this team.
Yeah.
But there's only one more team that the rest of the conference thinks there's more to like about. And that is the first place, at least at the moment, Texas Tech Red Raiders, who I think have been super bolstered by their opening win against North Carolina, where they ran roughshod through them. Now, North Carolina is not a very good team, but they're better than Western Kentucky. They're better than Marshall, and Tech beat them 52-3.
Yeah, it was a massacre in so many different ways, and as a Blue Devil, it made me very happy to watch. But in that game, though, they debuted one of the probably the most run-heavy attack that we're likely to see out of the Big 12 this year. They gave Saltman and McLaughlin the ball a lot. They let Chase Shapiro run it, and basically told Chase Shapiro, "Don't throw the ball. Just hang on. Do whatever you want on the ground, but we're not going to let you throw interceptions this year. We're doing that." And it's worked.
Yeah.
McLaughlin's leading the Big 12 in just about every rushing category so far. Actually, might be literally every rushing category so far. I think it is.
No one else has got enough carries for it, so I think he has to be.
Yeah, he's 9 ahead of Shamar Burrows, but also
only 9 ahead.
Yeah,
Interesting, but
I mean, if we're talking like 28 carries per game versus like 23, 24.
Yeah.
Wide over the course of the season. But his 285 yards are by far in first place over Maurice White. 5 touchdowns are ahead of anybody else.
So only about 5 yards a carry. That's really good, but it's nothing super outstanding because Maurice White's about the same.
Right.
So
5 yards a carry in that run having of an offense is impressive, though we also don't know how aggressively North Carolina was going up against the run.
Yeah, Boise State did a better job defending it. So I think it's going to be interesting to see when they play teams that can stop or can at least do more to stop the run. Because I think, especially as a freshman, there's a good chance there are some games where McLaughlin doesn't show up. Can Shapiro carry the load? I think that's their biggest weakness right now is still their quarterback position. Their biggest strength is probably the running back position because he's been incredible. But at the quarterback position, we'll see about Shapiro. He wasn't good last year. He's been better this year, and he hasn't really turned the ball over. But I think for Texas Tech to win the conference and go far, I think that's what it's going to rely on. I think the defense is going to be nothing special, nothing bad for them, but I really think it's going to end up relying on that duo of McLaughlin and Shapiro. And Shapiro has 2 rushing touchdowns, 47 on the ground, 2 touchdowns, which is a very good thing for them.
I do still like parts of their defense, the secondary in particular. Their front seven's kind of had some attrition, though. I think their 3.7 yards per carry allowed might be a mirage. But, still, though, through 2 games, they haven't allowed a touchdown, and they've never really made it. It's never really looked like they've come particularly close to it either. Like they've been able to keep everything in front of them and lock up the red zone anytime an opponent gets there.
Yeah, so there's a reason they're in first place right now. The first 2 games weren't terribly tough, but there's a lot to like from them.
Yep. And even though their opponents aren't terribly tough, like when you're up against a bad opponent, it says a lot if you crush them versus if you beat them ordinarily. And like nobody else has really been crushing that competition. So
except for Oklahoma State against Marshall. And
if you count Iowa State against New Mexico, like a 16-point win, but not like a huge stomping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Big 12 has some work to do.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that about wraps it up, I think. We went through the conference, talked about these teams. Next week's going to be real exciting. There's a lot to look forward to. I'm excited to play Rice. I'm excited to see what some of the other teams do.
And some recruits are going to be committing next week.
So I'm really excited to do this broadcast next week. Maybe we'll bring on another coach. We can do some interviews or something. But recruits. That's definitely going to be the site's going to be buzzing all week about recruits. People are ready to see what their classes start looking like. I think we're going to see a lot of commitments, especially with the 3 weeks, 30 points rule, because I think there are a lot of guys who don't have anyone competing for them. So it's going to be interesting seeing where people's commits are, where they're going to have to turn and check out the future. So that's always the best part because you get a recruit, and that's the next 4 years of your team, at least 5 years, and it's 2 years real time as he gets to have these guys.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely incredible. So signing off, it's the Big 12 Network. I'm Danger Zone.
I'm Storm Stopper.
And we'll see you another time.